if you don't have a background in takedowns and you've never really spent a considerable amount of time in the standing position, starting to hit takedowns can be something that's very hard for you to learn and sometimes even intimidating, right? You start to stand in front of a person, you see his hands in place, you see his head in place, guy's more athletic, stronger than you, and you're thinking to yourself, it's time to pull guard, okay? So, and that shouldn't necessarily be the case, all right? A lot of times in jiu-jitsu, you want to be as diverse as possible in your skill set. Now, I'm not asking you guys to become masters in the standing position, but what I would like of my students is I want my students to be at the very least competent in the standing position, so that if you did have to take somebody down, you'd at least have an option or two to go to, okay? Now, with that said, let's ask ourselves the question, if indeed I want to be competent in the standing position, what is one of the shortcuts, or what is one of the quickest ways that I can get there? And the answer is to start, let me get behind you, to start hitting takedowns from the rear, okay? If you start practicing and learning how to hit takedowns when you're behind somebody, where you don't have the obstacles, say for example, their arms in the way, their head's in the way, and your opponent can see you, right? If he's in front of me, he can see you, he can see what you're attempting, he can see what you're trying to do. You're behind the guy, all of a sudden, it's not that he can't see you, but seeing you is a lot harder. At the very best, he sees my peripheral. Look back a little bit. Yeah, he can see a peripheral, but not a full sight, okay? So you start to take out a lot of the elements of challenge that you'll face when you're directly in front of somebody, okay? So again, if you want to start thinking about developing and hitting a good takedown game, start thinking about how can I hit some of these takedowns when I'm behind somebody, when they can't see it coming, and then once I start hitting takedowns from there, then I'll be more confident, I'll get a better grasp of the mechanics, and then I'll start hitting them when I'm in front of somebody, okay? In some ways, a takedown is a lot like a Dutch oven, okay? You don't see it coming until it's too late, all right? Takedowns from the rear, all right? So with that said, turn around. So we're gonna start with takedowns from the rear today, okay? The first takedown we're gonna go over is a Kosoto Gake, okay? A Kosoto Gake is a outside reap, usually from the front. A Kosoto Gake is done like so. I come over the outside of my opponent's leg, and then from here, I'll drop my opponent to the ground. From the rear, same thing. I'm using an outside hook, but the way in which we incorporate the hook will be a little different, okay? It's gonna be a knee drop Kosoto Gake. I'm gonna be behind my opponent. My hands are gonna be locked in a gable grip situation. From here, I'm gonna take my forearm, roll my forearm over my opponent's hip like so. Just take this arm right there, beautiful. Roll my forearm over my opponent's hip like so. Notice my stance. My stance is splitting my opponent's legs. My hips are not far and away from my opponent, neither are my hips symmetrical with my opponent. What you wanna do is you wanna split your opponent's stance with your own. So I take my hip down the center of my opponent, down the center of my opponent's butt. I grasp my hands together and I roll my forearm like so. From here, I start to put weight with my head over the leg I want to attack. So I take my head and I start to put weight over that leg. Now from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna step, 1, reap, 2, knee touches the floor, 3, here. I've successfully managed to glue that foot to the mat with my Kosoto Gake action. Notice my hands have now unlocked. Why? I need to be able to base with this right hand. From here, I'm gonna use my left hand as a tight waist. I base, my head continues to move forward as my hand touches the mat, and now from here, I draw my opponent's hands to the mat. Once you draw your opponent's hands to the mat, immediately start to cover his hips again, and now from here, you're in a great situation to start to attack from the rear. Let's see again. I'm behind my opponent here. I grasp my hands together in a gable grip configuration. I roll my forearm over my opponent's hip. From here, notice my head. My head is putting weight over my opponent's leg here. From here, as I place weight on that leg, I step up to it. I create a crescent motion with my foot as I drop my knee to the mat, like so. From here, my left hand is still in the tight waist. I take my right hand, I post on the mat, as I use my head to draw my opponent's hands to the mat. I base, I build height, and I cover my opponent's hips with my knees, okay? First takedown, Kosoto Gake from the rear. On 3, 1, 2, 3.